Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur, a guy who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach you how to turn failure into your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We're a nearshore software engineering firm helping existing engineering teams scale with our Latin America-based resources. We also offer managed pods with US-based team leads. Today, I am joined by Justin Farris, who has been an experienced product leader working at big-name companies like Zillow and GitLab. He's now the VP of product at Read.ai out of Seattle, Washington. We're going to have some fun here. Justin, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You bet. Justin, if you would, take our listeners through a couple minutes of the journey of your career.
Yeah, sure. So it actually started way back when, after college, I attempted a short career in the film industry. So believe it or not, I do have an IMDb profile. You can look it up.
Right.
I do not recommend any of the movies that I worked on. They're all garbage. But that was a good kind of introduction to a world that I was genuinely interested in, technology and things. This was about the time the App Store launched. And so I was really interested in software, working in software. I ended up at a far too early augmented reality startup that failed. So I had some fun learnings there. And that eventually brought me over to Seattle. I grew up in Eastern Washington, and then eventually brought me over to Seattle, where I poked around a little bit in the startup scene here in Seattle, which was super vibrant. And then wound up at Zillow, where I wasn't sure what I was doing, but somehow I landed as a product manager in the sales organization, which was quite the experience, learning how go-to-market teams work and their opinions of product and technology teams. But then eventually wound up in our core product engineering function, leading our growth teams. So I led the growth product engineering teams there for a few years, loved real estate, loved houses. It was a super fun time and a great period of Zillow's growth that I had a fortunate opportunity to be a part of. And around that time, I got interested in DevOps. Zillow had some challenges shipping software efficiently. And so I picked up an effort to go solve that problem. And in doing so, wound up leaving my job and joining the company of the software that I ended up procuring to help solve that problem. So I wound up at GitLab before their IPO. And I led a slew of teams there, at one point in time, about half the portfolio of the product organization at GitLab. We built everything from CI/CD tools to security tools and helping software engineers, especially in large organizations, move more efficiently to ship safer software faster to customers. And then AI happened. And we've all been living that journey over the past, few years. And one of the things that was a deep conviction in me was to go find really interesting native AI startup that I could go back and join. And as a product leader, as a software leader, feeling really strongly that I wanted to have some firsthand experience in building in that environment where kind of all of the structures of a larger organization are removed and you can learn what it's like to build natively in AI. Not sprinkling AI over top of the legacy software product, but actually going from scratch and what is the core problem that we can solve, where AI is the product, not the sprinkling on top, not the frosting on top of an existing platform. And so one thing led to another, and that led me to Read.ai, where I was really impressed with the team, really interested in the product category and space, productivity tools. I'm seeing firsthand working at GitLab for a long time, where software is just accelerated dramatically with AI, whether you're using a Claude Code or Cursor or whatever. And I see productivity as a category being kind of the next frontier of that dramatic acceleration. So right up the wheelhouse of what I was interested in. It's here in Seattle, which I love, going back into the Seattle startup, community here, and building some really cool stuff and having a lot of fun so far.
Nice. So from actor to some startups to some more established companies, and as a software and product leader, GitLab would be a great place to learn. So much of software is based on their tools. So that's phenomenal. Tell us more about Read.ai.
Yeah. So Read is one of many, as you've probably seen, AI note takers in the market. So if you've joined a meeting with a bot where it's taken notes for you, there's a good chance that that was Read. And that's the core product. That's how the company, founded originally, was trying to figure out how might we make meetings better. Meetings are not the most fun thing that a knowledge worker does on a daily basis. And so how might we help that knowledge worker become more productive, become more efficient? And that led to some natural use cases like taking notes, extracting action items, helping a user become more productive, going from meeting to meeting and then reacting to the content that came out of that meeting. And over the last couple of years, we've expanded into new and more nascent product categories. One of which I love using on a daily basis. We call it Search Copilot. It's effectively an enterprise search product, but it's bottoms up. So unlike the others in the market where you have to go spend hours and months and days stitching together a knowledge graph and importing a bunch of data and worrying about security and privacy and ETL jobs and all that good stuff, you can actually just authenticate quickly through normal OAuth to whatever your knowledge source is, whether that's a Google Drive or a SharePoint or a Confluence, repository, what have you. And then we'll load all that data and build a knowledge graph for you relative to the scopes of your own user, and then you can search across it. And you can have Search Copilot take actions for you. So I can ask it a query like, hey, in that meeting last week where I said I would go deliver that design to our engineer, what did I actually commit myself to? And what am I supposed to do? And where's the Jira issue that references that thing? And it'll pull that all together for you and give me the plan of what I need to go do. And it'll say, hey, do you want to send Brad an email to go tell him you're working on it? Oh, yeah, sure, cool. So really fun and powerful tool, made more powerful by Read's base, which is really meeting capture, meeting notation, transcription, and action items. So it's a
Gotcha.
super
Well,
product and
I
yeah,
like
good.
how you summarized your career of being at companies. AI hit, everyone's trying to figure out how to sprinkle it on, getting involved in a company that doesn't have those legacy systems and can be AI from ground up. That's exciting. Now, you've been in this role just a couple months now, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I joined mid-September.
The golden question, how did you get the role? Did you apply on LinkedIn and cross your fingers and you just got it, or how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, the classic answer here with a lot of things is the network matters a ton. So the small story is I actually crossed paths with the CEO and founder David years ago when I first moved to Seattle. And the way I actually met him was through an investor on our board and one of our investors who we were pitching that augmented reality startup to way back when. So little did I know all of these puzzle pieces would eventually fit together in a way to land me a role. But because I knew the investor and eventually met David at some point along the way, didn't get a chance to work together back in 2011 or whatever that was. But I think my name kind of showed up on a list somewhere that I was maybe available or interested in changing roles, and a recruiter from Read had reached out and reconnected David and I. And then the next pieces are history. Then as we
Nice. So
had some conversations with him, but
network,
ultimately it's
network,
network.
network, and network.
It really is. I mean, the relationships you build earlier in your career, you don't realize it at the time, but matter a ton, years down the road. So little did I know, 15 years later or whatever, that relationship would have mattered to help me land a new gig, but totally did.
Well, and certainly on the product and engineering side, it's a volatile space. There's lots of challenges to solve, and leaders on the engineering and the product side can often be blamed, whether warranted or not. And I know everyone always likes to hear how others are finding their next role because it could be frustrating. Your guest 151 on the podcast, Justin. I think one guest so far said they actually just applied on LinkedIn and was able to get through. That's rare
Yeah,
because
good
you
for
know
them.
what LinkedIn or Indeed or Glassdoor or Job Post isn't getting hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants. And so excellent. Well, tell us about some cutting edge projects you guys are working on. Some fun stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really interested in, um, as I think about our Read user base, and this is one thing that's really exciting to me about joining Read. Read's user is a normie, I like to say. They're a normal knowledge worker. They're not a tech person. They're not a software engineer. They're not a product manager. They're your average run of the day accountant, knowledge worker, salesperson in a company that maybe isn't high tech or in that environment, right?
All
And
right.
what I've learned as a product person, poking around in these corners of AI is that a lot of those users when they use something like ChatGPT, they're just asking it questions. They're not using it in the advanced ways that you or I might use these kinds of tools. And so what they really need are products and capabilities that meet them where they're at, that allow them to do the normal job that they're doing, but support it in a natural way that's kind of an extension of what they're doing on a regular basis. They probably don't have the time or capacity right now, at least, to retool themselves to understand how might they completely change how they do their job to put AI in the center of it. Can they get something that helps them do that differently? And so one of the things we're interested in that space are AI assistants.
Okay.
So how might we build an assistant that works just like you'd use a human assistant to help you with some of those tasks? So for example, prior to joining Read, I worked in a publicly traded, software company. I had an executive assistant. We were big enough, kind of made sense, a lot of coordination that needed to happen across the organization. So I had an EA. When I joined Read, I asked David, I was like, hey, you have EAs here? And he's like, no, we're a Series B startup. You got to solve your own calendaring problems. I was like, okay, that's super fair, super fair. But what would happen if we could actually build an AI assistant, an AI EA? A digital twin like assistant that could help coordinate those things. And so we're experimenting with this. We don't have a product yet in market, but I thought it'd be interesting to share some behind the scenes of what we're working on. What's cool about this product that we built is I use it just like I remember using my executive assistant at GitLab. Where let's say, Steve, you emailed me and said, hey, Justin, you want to set up some time to record a podcast? we would do the dance, right? The dance of, oh yeah, and Tuesday at 3 p.m. and Wednesday at 1
Wait a
p.m.
minute. So you're saying your automation tools were interacting with my automation tools to
That's
get you on the
exactly right.
podcast?
That's exactly right. Yeah, totally. And so why this is magical is you don't have to retrain a user on how to work with that. They're used to that dance. They're used to engaging with an assistant potentially, whether it's theirs or someone that they're working with to help schedule time, to help schedule a meeting, to help coordinate.
So let me challenge you there a little, Justin. So calendar assistants have been around and pretty widely accepted for scheduling meetings, which is ultra helpful. What will this do beyond the scheduling? Because there has been a lot of tools making scheduling meetings easier.
Yeah.
Give us some more
Yeah.
insight.
Great question. So the other use case here that's interesting, if you look at like a chief of staff, I'm using these human equivalents so you understand the logic here. An EA is great for scheduling meeting, you're right, but a chief of staff is really a second in command in a lot of ways to a leader. They know probably the same information that you know in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, they could actually operate in your stead in some capacity. So if you need to send them as a delegate to a meeting or let them answer questions of someone who's reaching out. You trust them with the right answer. You trust them to use judgment and make the right decision. And you're leveraging their knowledge and their expertise to help you be more effective and more efficient yourself. And so this product we're working on, this digital twin, does the same thing. So like I mentioned, that search Copilot product, right? So if you're a user and you've hooked up all of your knowledge sources to Read, now we have the ability to represent you in a way that's interesting. And so I'll give you a good example of this. When I was joining the company just a couple months ago, David and I, the CEO, were going back and forth, and I was kind of asking some questions about, hey, what's on the product roadmap and what's the team working on? I kind of want to get myself mentally prepared for joining the company. And he just added his assistant, Ada. And Ada answered that question and gave me a pretty good answer. It was pretty logical, very structured, kind of, it
Is,
felt like
is
AI answer.
Ada a human assistant or is this an AI assistant?
Ada is AI. Ada is
Okay.
AI. Yeah. And so Ada answers the question. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But I was like, David's gonna be my boss. And naturally, founder, CEO, they're gonna poke pretty hard at some things that they feel very passionate about. And so I asked Ada, I said, hey Ada, what does David think is the most important thing on this list? Like, what does David think will move the needle against these goals that we've been talking about in this product roadmap? What does he think is the most important project? And he came back with an answer. And I was like, okay, that's great. And David fired off an email like 30 seconds later and said, that's spot on, right on. That's exactly what I would say. I was like, oh,
Nice.
that's really, really cool. So
To me, an AI chief of staff is a much further step than a scheduling tool. That's exciting.
yeah, it's super exciting. I think, and honestly, like the scheduling piece I think is really compelling and a great entry point for someone to use that technology because it's an extension of how they're already operating, right? But what this does in the onboarding experience is it educates you on how you might use it. It gives you some examples as well. And so we're really interested to see it. We're going to launch it as a beta in the not too distant future. And we're really interested to see how people use it because when you're building these AI systems, you might have the best sort of framing of how you think the product will be used and how it will work. But ultimately, these systems are probabilistic. And you don't know, especially when you're building agents and multi agent systems, actually how people will end up using it. So I'm really excited to see those use cases kind of materialize. And then we'll go optimize for them over time and make them really stick.
Very cool. All right. So, Justin, my company is brought in many times to help companies solve software challenges. And 9 times out of 10, the challenges are the product team and the engineering team are not in sync. How do you go about this, having worked at large and small companies alike, dealing on the product side, which is and making sure the engineering team and the product teams are aligned? What's your secret to this? Because this is not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I've certainly faced a lot of different manifestations of that challenge in different ways over my time. One of the common themes that I come back to and I'm a big believer in is communicating the why. Um, my when I see it fail the worst in the most dramatic way is when engineering doesn't have a clear understanding of why we're building something. And so what they end up doing is they get hyper focused on the details of the what, and if something's not going right, or we need to, I mean, it's agile development, we're iterating, we're changing plans, we're reacting to market conditions, reacting to user feedback. If you're just hyper focused on, I got to deliver this thing, you get really frustrated if that thing changes or if the target moves or if something is learned and then, the plans have to shift, right? And so if we're able as a,
It's the real world right now. Plans are shifting
oh my
faster than they can be built, right?
that's right. That's right. And even it's specific to that, like you can't, 3 years ago, I could articulate a product roadmap that gets me through a year, and it's pretty right. 12 months from now,
Mhm.
now with AI, it's like at best you got a month, right?
Yeah,
And the right change, right? So, so to the
definitely
why,
agree.
yeah. So to the why, it really, if product's job, in my opinion, is to focus on making sure we understand the user problems and are able to articulate a clear why and direction we want to go. Obviously, we're going to go deliver PRDs and give you specifics and details to an engineering team of what needs to happen. But if that why is clear, it lets engineering operate a little bit more independently. So they're not just constantly coming back and looking for input and direction from the product side of the house.
All right, so let's geek out here a little bit. Tell us what the product and engineering teams at Read.ai look like, the work models you guys follow, where the teams are based.
Yeah, yeah. So predominantly we're all based in Seattle, although we do have some remote folks across the board, and that just is kind of case dependent. In terms of operating model, I'll say this, I don't think we have it right. I think there's some room to grow. And I think the reality of that is it's a reflection of an AI native startup where we're not big, we can be really flexible. Priorities change, direction changes. We're refining like one common thing you see with AI native startups is product market fit is not as durable as it was 5 or 10 years ago. Product market fit erosion is real. And so when that's happening, you have to actually be willing to flex and change your operating model on a regular basis. But I'll give you some constants that I think are true and relatively stable. One, I love bringing engineering left. I worked in DevOps for 6 years. All I did was talk about shifting security left. As a product leader, I think deeply about shifting engineering left, and left being evaluating product priorities, doing user research and UX research, thinking about the craft of the design and the output. And one of the things I believe will be true in the future is we're going to blur the lines between the traditional DPE stack. So design, product engineering. And I don't know if you go all in on the full stack builder mentality. I'm not sure if I'm there yet personally, but I do believe that this technology is enabling people that have more narrow skill sets be comfortable dabbling in areas that they might not be comfortable in. So for example, I as a PM did a little bit of engineering in my career early on, but I as a PM can vibe code a prototype and communicate an idea and test some experiences with users where normally I would have to schedule work on engineering. An engineer can leverage ChatGPT or a tool, an AI tool to help them think about a user problem more deeply, where they normally would rely on, a PM or a designer to do that. And so I think in that model, we're a lot more fluid and flexible working collaboratively, excuse me, with each other. I think it makes it really fun.
Now, for our YouTube viewers, you have a whiteboard behind you. Are you in office or is this your
I
home office?
am in office. This whiteboard just has a cat and a smiley face, it looks like.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, we're hybrid. So we do 3 days a week in the office, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then most folks will work from home on Mondays and Fridays. It's flexible. Some people come to the office on Mondays and Fridays. If something's going on in the middle of the week, you can work from home, no problem. I worked at GitLab was all remote and fully distributed around the world. So I went from that environment to here where we're mostly located in Seattle and we're hybrid. I love this where we're at now, where Read is. I found it challenging, to be honest, working in an all remote environment when you had a really hard problem and you just wanted to speaking of whiteboards, just wanted to get in a room with a whiteboard and draw it out and like collaborate with someone. That was really hard to replicate on Zoom. But I also love the benefit of having my Mondays
There's
and Fridays.
product I need created because I agree with you wholeheartedly in that I have not found anything that can replace in-person whiteboarding to solve challenges. And there's a lot of, virtual whiteboarding tools, but as a product guy, Justin, I need you to, build this for me that will be just as good and productive as in-person whiteboard.
Oh my gosh, maybe it's something I should put on the Read roadmap. I'd love it. Yeah. Oh man. No, so yeah, I totally agree.
So, how has, talk about the last year, how the product side has changed as far as bringing prototypes to market? I mean, certainly you mentioned vibe coding. There's some great tools out there that, help you get to prototype in days where it used to be months, if not longer. What's your vantage point of how the product side role has evolved and will continue to evolve?
Yeah. And truthfully, this was one of the core motivators for me to want to come to a place like Read so I could have this experience sort of building in this way. But what I've seen change dramatically is normally, a PM would spend a lot of cycles writing words to articulate direction and a plan, right? I don't think that should stop. I still think PM should write words. I'm a big believer in writing things down because I think it gets out clear thinking. But what's different now is that you can validate an idea you have or evaluate an idea you have much more quickly than writing a bunch of words, running a survey, doing some interviews, asking questions. You can prototype a solution to a problem that you think you have and get that in the hands of a user, even if it's a pure prototype and you're just like, hey, I'm gonna share my screen and let you control it, and you can press some buttons and give me some feedback, or here's a link to something that isn't real, but it's a prototype you can play with. Um, Pictures communicate a lot more than words sometimes. And
Yes.
so being able to do that is a superpower, I think, that a lot of product folks have never had before. And it lets you move a lot faster through those early cycles of evaluating concepts, ideas, and direction and business problems without burning cycles on engineering or kind of deeper. We've had prototyping tools before, but they were all point and click and really
Yeah.
complicated hypercard things you had to build. And now you can do it super, super fast.
What
And I
What
think
do you like? What are some of the tools for rapid prototypes you like?
it's an interesting challenge. So if you are building something from scratch, um, any tool works. I'm a cursor user, to be honest, but I came from an environment where I was building dev tools for software developers at GitLab. So I got really comfortable with tools like that. If you're not, that's totally fine. I think like a Lovable or a Bolt or any of those are great for that kind of problem. Most PMs aren't in that situation though. Most PMs have an existing product that they need to build a prototype from, right? They're not building something from scratch. And
Right.
so how do you go about taking your existing design system and language of how you communicate and the site and yada yada? You got to do some extra work there. I'm interested to see where the space goes. Figma has Figma Make and they let you pull in components of your design system. I think they have a little bit more room to go before it's great. There's tools like magic patterns that I found are pretty useful, where you can actually go with a Chrome extension and go grab components with that Chrome extension and then load them into a repository. So then when you go vibe code a prototype, it's grabbing from known components instead of just grabbing from a screenshot, which 9 times out of 10 will fail, right? So I recommend using those. And then as you get more comfortable, and you want to actually manipulate real product, Cursor, Claude Code, Codex are great tools.
I don't know a lot of product people that are great product people, but don't have the chops to use Cursor or have that engineering background. So that brings.
My advice on that, I might have a little bit, but it really is, you just get over the intimidation factor. In fact, I'll tell you this: Claude Code or Codex are actually phenomenal replacements to ChatGPT if you don't want the generic ChatGPT sort of prompt fluff. So if you want to, and I do this actually, I have an example here. I have a PRD critique sort of prompt that I've built where you can upload a PRD and it'll go critique it. When I load that up in ChatGPT, it'll say, "Oh, Steve, great idea, but here's some feedback," right? I don't need any of that. I want to remove the fluff. And so if you can actually use a tool like Codex or, Claude Code, which is the same underlying model, GPT-5, Claude 4.0, whatever, but it strips out that system prompt and it's actually a lot more direct. That's a fun way to expose yourself to using those tools. It gives you some value, and then it gets you over the sort of psychological barrier of like, oh, do I got to fire up a command line? It's actually not that hard. You can Google it, follow the instructions, and it's not too painful to get to using it.
Great tips and very, very good insights and suggestions there. This AI world that AI has been around for a very long time, but the last 2 years, generative AI has really changed the game, accelerated things. But, there's this constant issue right there that large companies are having negative ROI on their generative AI projects. In fact, MIT last quarter talked about 95% of the projects are failing. Why do you think that is, Justin?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, in a large organization, it's really hard to do change management in general. It's really hard to reskill and retool a workforce. But when I see those failures occur and I kind of read into it and kind of figure out what's going on, it's often because they've deployed it wrong. They've thought about it like an old business problem, not like a new problem. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. I've seen an organization, someone who I advised and did some consulting with, where they just said, oh, well, we're going to shove the AI function in our IT team and then have IT figure out what tools we're going to go build. And then that IT team, or build or buy or whatever, deploy, right? And then the IT team will go roll those tools out to the whole organization. And then it's like Field of Dreams. They think if you build it, they will come. And the answer is they did not come. And you see this adoption curve that occurs where you have in a normal organization, when you deploy AI, like you have, 5% of people that are the feverish adopters of these new technologies. Maybe you have 10% of people that'll dabble and experiment, and then the rest of them just won't touch it, right? The different way to do it, the way that's more successful, is when you pick the function where you can have a step change in productivity, and you actually have the people that lead that function figure out what tools, technologies, and changes they want to make and learn it firsthand. And so you don't put the IT machine in their way. You remove all of those barriers and you let them figure out the problem in that environment. And you don't try and build and buy one size fits all tools to solve those issues. When you do it that way, you get way more success.
I mean, so you're essentially referring, taking a traditional product approach to your internal teams versus, having IT
Right.
roll it out without getting the end user input.
That's right. Yeah. And I think these cycles happen where, of course, it happened that way. And of course, that's going to happen. Of course, MIT wrote about it, right? I think a couple more years, we'll start to see more of those success stories where it's rolled out in ways that make a lot more sense. And then you'll see that replication occur across the industry.
So as a product leader, we're getting ready to wrap up 2025 here. What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing now?
Yeah, I think, pace of change in AI is a real challenge. What I know is true about the underlying and fundamental technologies that enable Read to build great products today could be different in 30 days, right? Or less. And so how do you plan a roadmap and a strategy and a direction when that sand is shifting so rapidly underneath of you? I don't have a good answer. I don't have a good answer other than staying close to it, learning some of the foundational principles behind these technologies to understand more quickly when something does change, can you benefit from it and how? But it is a big challenge. And I think as sort of the level of investment continues, as you can see in the market, as the dynamic change rate that's occurring continues, I think that will still be a challenge for a while, but it is fun. It keeps you on your toes.
So, what's one brutal lesson you've learned through the numerous companies and products and software teams you've been a part of that you wish you would have learned earlier in your career?
Man, I think, especially with AI, one of the things that, and we did this at GitLab, fell into this trap, but one of the things you often will do when you're experimenting with new technologies like this is your default sort of mode is to just copy. Okay, this company's doing this. Oh, I think we could do that for our company. I think we could do that for our product. Let's go copy it and replicate it exactly. The failure mode there is you don't really understand how your users are using the product in that way. You don't understand what problems and jobs to be done need to be solved when you're just sort of copying and pasting and lifting and shifting those kinds of solutions. But it's a very natural thing to do because you don't fully understand the core technology that you're bringing into your product. And so you're like, well, I don't understand it fully, so I'm just going to copy it. You got to spend the time to figure it out. It's fundamental. It's what I learned earlier on in my career, but I totally abandoned it for a little bit there when I first started building with AI. I've come back. I figured it out, but it was definitely a brutal lesson, and it burned a bunch of time. It burned months of work, months of energy, products that we shipped that didn't get much adoption and usage, and had to kind of reset the roadmap and start back over.
Fortunately, it's been my experience that you learn from your failures, not your successes. When you have success, you get cocky. You don't always look at all the key elements that were part of it. But when you fail, a smart person, and this is what I focus on teaching people, is you make sure to understand every aspect and what you could carry forward to not repeat the same mistakes. It's unfortunate that that's one of the best teachers, but that's certainly been my experience.
Yep.
Justin, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today and sharing your journey both throughout your career at Read.ai. You really have a rare combo of product tied with more engineering experience than most product people that I hear, which makes you very powerful. What's some no BS advice you have for today's tech and product leaders out there who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these interesting times?
No BS advice. I would say, especially now, you got to find a way to block time to learn new things. Like we talked about with like a product person overcoming the hump of touching some of these coding tools, it's okay. It's not that scary. I think you can figure it out. Just prompt something, see how it fails, learn some lessons from it. But you're never going to do it if you don't protect the time. So you really have to say, hey, Friday mornings for 2 hours every Friday morning, I'm going to go spend time learning and developing some new skills. I think it's critical and super important.
Great advice. Justin, thanks again for coming on. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you like the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, we'll just send it to your competitors, probably the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. All right. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.